The metal doors of the warship slid open with a cold hiss. Vela stood tall, her silver armor shining under the lights. She was the High Commander of the Crither Dominion, feared across 5 star systems. Her red eyes scanned the prisoner, being. Dragged in, he was human. Dirty, bruised, hands bound, but standing straight, not trembling, not begging, just watching her like he was curious. Not afraid, her second-in-command, Rax, gave a short bow. "We found him hiding near the reactor core," Rax said. "He's just an engineer." Vela stepped forward, stopping inches from the human's face. He smelled of oil, smoke, and stubbornness. "What's your name, prisoner?" she asked sharply. The human smiled, slow and calm. "Jace," he said. "And you must be the queen of this floating junk pile." Rax moved to strike him, but Vela raised a hand. She stared at Jace for a long second. Something about his tone. His eyes, it didn't match the moment. "You are a prisoner of war," she said. "Speak with respect." "I am," he answered. "But you don't seem like someone who enjoys respect. You seem bored." Her lips tightened. He was clever. Too clever for a mere engineer. "Take him to holding cell B," she ordered. "I'll deal with him myself." As they dragged Jace away, he looked over his shoulder and called out, "Hope you don't get too lonely, Commander." The words echoed down the corridor like a challenge. Vela turned away before anyone saw the slight smile she tried to hide. Inside the command chamber, Vela sat in her chair, watching the stars pass beyond the glass. She had ruled this warship for years, broken enemies twice her size, but that human, Jace. He didn't even flinch when she approached, didn't show fear. He joked. Like it was all a game. She checked the report again. He had disabled 2 Crither drones by rewiring a fusion link. Not bad for someone without claws or armor. Later that night, she entered the cell area alone. Jace sat on the floor, back against the wall, humming a human song. When he saw her, he raised one eyebrow. "Back for round 2?" he asked, smiling again. "You're not afraid of me," Vela said, stepping into the cell. Jace shook his head. "No? Why?" "Because I've seen scarier things than you," he said. "I've worked with angry machines, starved beasts, and one time, a 3-headed chef. You're just sharp." Vala's claws twitched slightly. Most prisoners begged for mercy, or tried to make deals. This one, he was teasing her, or worse, testing her. "Do you understand your position here?" she asked coldly. "I do," Jace replied. "You're in charge, I'm in chains. But the funny thing is, power's not always where it looks." She leaned closer, her voice a low growl. "You think you're in control?" "I think," Jace said softly, "you're the one who walked in here to talk to me, not the other way around." Vela stepped back quickly, her heart beating faster for a reason she couldn't name. No one talked to her like that. No one dared. She stormed out of the cell and slammed the door shut, but Jace's words stayed with her. That night, she didn't sleep. Across the ship, whispers began. The crew noticed their commander acting strange. She stayed silent during briefings, snapped at her officers, and visited the human cell too often. Rax watched closely, frowning more each day. Something was changing, and it started the moment that human arrived. But Vela didn't care what they said. Every time she looked into Jace's eyes, she felt something dangerous. Not fear, not hate. Something softer, something warmer, and that scared her more than any enemy ever had. The next morning, Vela stood in front of the cell again, but this time she didn't open the door right away. She just stared through the glass, arms crossed, watching Jace lean back with his hands behind his head like he was on vacation. He looked too calm for a prisoner, too relaxed. That alone annoyed her more than it should have. She finally entered, steps slow and steady, her eyes sharp. Jace sat up, smirking a little. "Didn't expect to see you again so soon," he said, "Miss me already?" She didn't reply, just placed a small tool set on the floor in front of him. "You'll fix the navigation console," she said, voice flat. "I thought I was a prisoner," he replied, lifting a brow. "You are," she said, "but we need your skills, and I don't waste useful things." Jace chuckled, picking up a wrench. "Useful, huh? That's the nicest thing you've said to me so far." She ignored the comment and led him through the corridors, 2 guards walking behind, rifles ready. But Jace didn't try to run. Didn't act afraid, he kept looking around, asking questions. "Admiring the ship, your hull plating is mismatched," he said casually. "That's not a design choice, is it?" She didn't answer, but a twitch in her jaw said he was right. When they reached the console room, Jace knelt down and opened the panel. Wires sparked as he worked, fingers moving fast and sure. Vela watched him closely, arms still crossed, pretending she didn't care, but she did. Every time he made a joke or hummed a human tune, the silence inside her cracked a little more. After 10 minutes, the console screen blinked back to life, steady and strong. "Done," Jace said, wiping his hands on his pants. "You're welcome." The guards moved to grab him. But Vela raised her hand again. "Let him walk," she said, and the guards looked confused but obeyed. As they walked back to the cell, Jace looked sideways at her. "You're different from the others," he said quietly. She frowned. "What do you mean?" "You listen," he said. "You think, not just react. You act cold. But you don't enjoy cruelty, do you?" She didn't answer, and this time the silence between them was thick with tension. When they reached the cell, he stepped in without being told, turned around, and looked at her through the glass. "Next time you need something fixed," he said, "just ask nicely." Then he smiled and sat down like a king returning to his throne. Vela stood there longer than she should have. She told herself she was thinking about ship repairs, tactical positions, fuel efficiency, but deep down, all she could think about was the way Jace had looked at her. Not like a prisoner looks at a guard, but like an equal, like someone who saw right through her. Armor that night, she stared at her reflection in the mirror. And for the first time, she wasn't sure who was really in control anymore. Jace's name started slipping through the ship like a quiet infection. Technicians whispered it when broken systems suddenly worked better than before. Lorien King guards began greeting him, some even nodding with respect. He was still a prisoner. Yes, but somehow he walked like he belonged, and Vela noticed, even if she didn't speak of it. She watched him one day from the upper platform as he adjusted a power relay. He joked with the engineer beside him, even as sparks popped in his face. The alien beside him laughed, a sound she hadn't heard from that crew member in cycles. That made her jaw tighten. This wasn't right. He was supposed to be controlled, isolated, beneath them. Later that evening, Vela called a private meeting. With her officers, the room was silent when she entered. Her presence like cold metal, she stood at the head of the table, claws tapping the surface slowly. "No one is to speak with a human without permission," she said. "He is not part of this crew." The officers exchanged glances, unsure but obedient. Rax, her second in command, spoke up at last. "With respect, Commander, the human has been helpful, morale is higher. Systems are running smoother." She glared at him, and Rax fell silent. After the meeting ended, she remained in the dark room alone, staring at the chair Jace had never sat in, but somehow it felt like his presence had already reached here too. That night, she didn't summon him. She didn't need a reason. But she still waited quietly, angry that he didn't come looking for her first. The next morning, Vela passed through the mess hall during inspection. She expected silence, as usual, but instead, she heard laughter, warm, loud, real. And there he was, Jay, sitting at the far table with 2 Krithar crew members, trading stories over a shared food tray. One of them offered him a drink. He accepted it with a smile and a terrible impression of their accent, which made them burst into laughter again. She froze. It wasn't the laughter that hurt. It was that they laughed like they had forgotten she was watching. Without a word, she turned and walked away. Boots hitting the floor harder than necessary. Her heart shouldn't be racing, but it was. She shouldn't be angry. But something deep inside boiled hotter than rage. It felt too much like jealousy. Jace wasn't just fixing wires anymore. He was rewriting the balance of the ship, one smile, one joke, one shared story at a time. Back in her private quarters, Vela slammed her armored fist into the wall, not out of pain, but out of confusion. She had conquered planets, crushed rebellions, and silenced traitors. But she didn't know how to silence one human engineer who made her crew feel more alive than she ever had. She leaned against the wall, eyes closed, breathing heavy, not from anger, but from something far worse, doubt. And under that doubt, a question burned quietly in her chest. Why did she want his attention more than anyone else's? A loud alarm shattered the night silence. Red lights spun through the halls, and the ship rocked as if punched by a giant. Vela was already awake, halfway into her armor before the second tremor hit. Outside, in deep space, a shadow-moved pirates, fast and brutal, had ambushed them in a nebula pocket. They were outnumbered, and worse, unprepared. On Deck 3, a blast ripped through the floor, taking out half the circuit web. The ship's core dimmed, navigation scrambled, oxygen flow stuttered, sparks flew. Systems failed, chaos spread, and in the middle of it all, Jace ran toward the damage instead of away from it. No one ordered him. No guard pushed him forward. He just moved, fast and focused, like he belonged here more than the soldiers did. He slid under a busted panel, fingers dancing over glowing wires. His voice was calm even as flames cracked around him. Bypass coolant relay. Reroute stabilizers. Come on, baby, don't die on me now. A crew member screamed behind him, injured. Pinned by falling metal, Jace didn't hesitate. He crawled across the smoke-choked floor and pulled the alien free with a grunt. His hands were burned, but he still smiled. "You owe me a drink, big guy," he muttered. Vela reached the engine room just as power returned. The lights flickered, then steadied, and there stood Jace, covered in grease, soot, and blood, breathing hard, smiling like a madman. Their eyes met across the firelit room. He didn't salute, didn't kneel, didn't even speak. He just gave her a thumbs up and walked past like he owned the place. Vela stood, frozen, armor scorched, heart thudding. That wasn't a human prisoner, that was a soldier, a protector, a leader, and her crew followed his example without question. She wanted to punish him, yell at him, remind everyone who was in command. But how do you discipline someone who just saved your ship? That night, she visited the medical bay. Quietly, Jace lay on a cot, bandaged but awake. He looked up and grinned. "I thought about running," he said, voice soft. "But you guys are growing on me." She didn't speak for a long time, just sat beside him, watching the slow rise and fall of his chest. Then finally, she said, "You had no reason to help us." He shrugged. "Didn't need one." Her eyes narrowed. "Why?" He turned his head to her, smile fading, voice honest. "Because I'm human. And we don't leave people to burn, even if they once called us enemies." Vela didn't sleep that night either. But not because she was confused now. She was afraid of how deeply his words had shaken something inside her. Not weakness, not fear, but the dangerous beginning of admiration. Vela sat alone in her command chamber, the stars crawling past the window like cold memories. She had fought through war zones, silenced rebellions, even stood before the Krither High Council without trembling. But now her hands felt unsteady. Not because of fear, because of him, Jace, the human prisoner. No. The human problem was changing everything. Not just the ship, not just the crew. He was changing her. She found herself standing outside his recovery room again, second time. That day, no reason, no orders, just standing there, staring at the closed door. And then she opened it. He sat on the edge of the bed, shirt half torn, chest bruised, still fixing a busted cum piece like nothing had happened. He looked up and grinned. "You again," he said. "You sure you're not stalking me?" She ignored the joke and stepped inside. But this time, no armor, no guards, just her, and for the first time. She felt exposed, not physically, but emotionally. "I need answers," she said. He tilted his head. "To what?" "To you," she said sharply. "Why are you like this? Calm, careless, kind. You don't fear me, and that makes no sense." Jace put the device down and looked at her with eyes that held no lies. "I don't care about titles or armor," he said. "I care about people, and you're not what you pretend to be." "Commander," she flinched, just slightly. "What am I then?" she asked, voice lower than before. He stood, slowly, and walked over to her, not threatening, just close. "You're tired," he said. "Tired of being the monster they expect you to be, but you don't have to be that anymore." The words hit like a blade through fog. Vela didn't move, didn't speak, because deep down she knew he was right. Something inside her cracked like an old wall, finally breaking. She turned away, heart racing. "You should rest," she said, voice tight. "That's an order." Jace smiled gently. "Only if you get some rest too." She left without another word. But she didn't go back to her quarters. She walked the ship alone, silent, haunted by a voice that didn't command her, but reached her, and in that silence, one thought burned brighter than any star outside. He wasn't taming her with power, he was taming her with truth. The arrival of a Krither warship wasn't planned. It dropped from hyperspace like a knife to the throat-no signal. No warning. Vela watched from the bridge as the vessel hovered beside her own. Markings clear. High Command had come. Not for a visit, but for a judgment. Her coms crackled with a voice she knew all too well: General Tarak, a loyalist and political predator. "We've been watching," the voice said coldly. "Prepare the human prisoner for transfer and execution. You've allowed too much, Commander." The crew fell silent, eyes flicking to Vela. Her silence felt like a storm waiting to break, and break it did. She didn't respond through the comms. She turned around and walked out, armor hissing, breath tight, claws twitching. Jace was in the engineering bay, surrounded by systems he'd rebuilt. He looked up as soon as she entered. Something in her eyes told him this wasn't a normal visit. "What is it?" he asked quietly. "They're here," she replied, "and they want you dead." He didn't flinch, didn't panic. He just exhaled slowly. "You going to let them take me?" That question hung heavy in the air like smoke after fire. Vela stepped closer, too close, voice low. "I don't know what I'm doing," she said. "I don't disobey orders, Jace." "Then why are you still standing here?" he asked, and that was it. The line she had been walking for days finally snapped. Sirens blared again, this time internal, unauthorized movement, weapons drawn. The crew didn't know what was happening, but Rax did. He confronted her in the corridor, blade raised, voice shaking. "You're betraying the Dominion for a human?" She didn't answer with words. She blocked his strike, slammed him into the wall, and whispered, "I'm choosing what's right." Jace waited at the hangar, a small escape pod ready. He was about to say something brave, something clever. But she kissed him first, not a soft kiss, not gentle. It was fire, steel, surrender, and defiance all at once, when they pulled apart. She placed something in his hand, her command chip. "You're not just fixing ships anymore," she said. "You're fixing me." Then she turned, blaster drawn, walking back toward her own fleet. Not to surrender, but to buy time, because if there was one thing left she could do with honor, it was to fight for the human who never asked for her loyalty, but earned it completely. Asterisk smoke rose behind her like a dark flag. Explosions tore through the ship as Vela held her ground in the corridor. Her once loyal crew now turned weapons on her, ordered by the High Command to kill a traitor. But she didn't fall back. She moved like lightning, silent, sharp, unstoppable. Not for glory, not for victory, but to make sure he got away. Jace's escape pod punched through the chaos, cutting into the void like a comet. He didn't want to run. But Vela had locked the hatch behind him, voice still in his ear. "You have to live, Jace, or none of this meant anything." He whispered her name again and again, like it could pull her out of the flames. But all he heard was static. 3 weeks passed. The pod landed on a quiet moon, no cities. No wars, just sky and wind and silence. Jace built a shelter, fixed a beacon, and waited. Every day he stared at the sky. Every night he dreamed of her flames in her eyes, strength in her voice. And that kiss so real, it burned even in memory. Then, one morning, the alarm on his scanner beeped once. A ship, small and damaged, limped through the clouds. He ran out, heart slamming against his ribs, hands trembling. The door opened slowly, steam curling out. And there she was, armor scratched, hair wild, one eye bruised, but alive. They didn't speak, they didn't need to. She walked into his arms and melted into him like she had belonged there forever. Her claws, once weapons, now curled gently against his back, and her voice, soft for the first time, broke the silence. "I lost everything," she whispered, "except you." Jace pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "Then we build something new," he said. Together, she smiled, not the smirk of a warlord, but the quiet, peaceful smile of a woman who had finally found home. And as the stars turned slowly above them, Bella, former High Commander of the Crither Dominion, curled up beside the human she once tried to break. Not as a prisoner, not as a pet, but as something far more dangerous and rare. A heart finally tamed by love.